World leaders caught on camera laughing about President Trump.
Several world leaders mocking President Trump.
They're laughing at him.
My administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
World leaders mocking and ridiculing him for being completely off balance.
Allies are deeply worried about it. They say he's becoming increasingly isolated. Something is very wrong.
The world sees Trump for what he is: insincere, ill-informed, corrupt, dangerously incompetent, and incapable, in my view, of world leadership. And if we give Donald Trump 4 more years, we'll have a great deal of difficulty, if ever, being able to recover America's standing in the world and our capacity to bring nations together.
The Forum 2, exclusively on YouTube Live, weekdays from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. We tackle the tough issues: political, social, cultural, and racial. It may not be what you expect to hear, but we will definitely give you what you need to know. Check out our website, theforum2.com. Call in live, 414-395-0484. Check us out. Good morning. Welcome to the program. Today is Wednesday, October 14th, 2020. I'm going to start the show with a little more good news today. But at least I think it's good news, and I think that we are on our way to something monumental, something momentous, and that's the perspective that I want to have today. Of course, I'm going to pepper that with some bad news because we are living in the year 2020 in the United States of America, so no good news goes unpunished. The good news is 12 million people have already voted. Yesterday, that number was 10 million. We're averaging so far, at least in the last 36 hours, 2 million more votes cast. And we're not even at election day. In fact, we're not even at the start of early voting in Wisconsin. Even our mail-in voting numbers in this state, leading the nation of the states that have started their early voting programs. This is very, very encouraging, and something I said yesterday, and I don't want it to go unnoticed. We need to try and break the system, because how the system was, and it's largely us, right? People don't vote in every single election, every opportunity that they get. And so there is an expectation. And also, governments have to figure out exactly how much money they're going to spend, how much money they're going to allocate to election administration. And if you only have 5, 10, 15% voter turnout in some local elections, they're not going to expend tremendous amounts of resources for low voter turnout. What I believe this election is going to do, and I'm not going to yet predict the winner. All I can do is give you my emotional thoughts on who I want to win, who I want to see go to jail. Things are going to start changing because there are people who have been intimidated by the process, or they didn't believe in it, or they just never wanted to vote, or they weren't compelled to vote. I think more people are feeling the urgency to take that very important step to vote. And once you vote and you see it's not as bad as you thought, there's no boogeyman waiting for you at the polls. You know what they used to say here in Milwaukee and maybe in other places, that if you had misdemeanors, if you owed back child support, that you couldn't vote. Totally false. And we spent many, many years trying to, do different public service announcements, trying to clean that up. And we finally gotten to a place where those are known lies. But it was just that air of suspicion that voters had. If you've never voted before, you don't know what's waiting for you on the other side of that door to that polling location. But we're at a point right now where people have been so twisted and torn and lost friends and jobs and money and hope and opportunity. And the vote is almost the last refuge for some people. And I believe the voter turnout is going to increase from this point forward, because once you have this new group of people, the non-voters, the undecideds, the I don't like the Democrat crowd, I don't like the Republican crowd, once you get them involved and invested, here's what I want you to watch for from this point forward. Regardless of what the result is on November 3rd or November 13th or December 13th, whenever we stop counting votes, those who are in elected office are going to notice something that's going to be everywhere. They're going to notice that they're going to have to change what they say and how they do. If we get somewhere near 70% voter turnout in America, and I think that number is conceivable, 12 million people have already voted. In some regions of the country, that's more people than would vote in a normal presidential election on election day. 12 million votes have already been cast, and we're just getting started. When you're a comfortable senator or a member of Congress and you rely on people staying home, and only your strongest supporters and only your most partisan voters are coming out to vote for you, when you see numbers like this in your congressional district or in your state, you're going to change how you communicate with voters. You're going to be much more inclusive of those people who you never had to worry about before, because now those constituents, those non-voters, have entered into the fold, and they're bringing a whole bunch of different issues with them. They're bringing low wages. They're bringing healthcare to the fold, in which you can no longer ignore some of these issues. They're bringing law enforcement and policing and the unenforcement applications of justice. We're going to begin to change what the politicians say and how they feel about the political issues just by having higher voter turnout. And this is what gives me a level of optimism, because no longer can they ignore those individuals who have needs, who are members of our society, but do not participate in the political process. Good morning, everybody streaming on the YouTube Live. If you have not, subscribe to our channel. It is youtube.com/theforum2com. Or if you just go to YouTube and type in the forum number 2, we shall appear before your very eyes. Vanessa G., Curtis Cook, Dorian Higgins, good morning to you. Dorian, Denise Jones says, good morning, people. Gail Williams, Loretta Cunningham, G. Collins, good morning. G. Collins says, this hour goes by way too fast. Well, if I've experimented with longer videos, stop playing. Y'all don't watch. Like 3 of you, if I go much past an hour, only like 4 of you will continue to watch. But I try not to limit myself. If there's a topic of conversation that comes up at hour 59, we just run with it. But I did want to start with that bit of optimistic news that 12 million people have voted. Because what I'm going to start doing is looking for the positives that can come out of the year 2020. We've engaged people. We have excited people about this process. And maybe we use the wrong reasons. Maybe we engage them because they're afraid. Maybe they're excited because they don't want to see 4 more years of what we had, and they're looking forward to 4 more years of what is yet to come. But either way, I think that the political discourse between the democracy, the body politic, the public, and the elected officials is going to change, because voter turnout is more powerful than any weapon, any armed militia, any Proud Boy, any white supremacist. So now I can put it into a context that I hope makes sense to more people. The reason why they want to diminish voter turnout, they don't want drop boxes. And in Texas, a judge just upheld a rule where Governor Abbott can limit the number of drop boxes for your ballot. Why they do all this voter suppression. Why Donald Trump labeled Black people and Black voters as a deterrence in the year 2016. Because the vote is more powerful than any army or militia they could ever put together, because that is something they cannot defeat. We have the numbers. Those of us that believe in a better future, a much more inclusive and fair, just America. There is no number of people they can send to intimidate people at the polls when the voter turnout is overwhelming. That's why I want us to break the system. We have to redefine how we cast votes anyway. And now is the time to do it. I don't think the American system is equipped to handle 100% voter turnout. It isn't. It should be, but it's not. So let's see how close to 100% turnout we can get, because when the system starts breaking down at 68%, 69%, 70% voter turnout, which is a massive number of people, by the way, that's better than 160, 170 million people. But we need to see the inconsistencies of our system, because I believe now you've got young people, like maybe in high school, that they're affected by this too. They don't want to be at home with their parents, getting taught math and history and social studies by their mom that's drinking wine at 8:30 in the morning. These young people are affected by this too. They see what Donald Trump's failed leadership has done to their senior year in high school, their freshman year in college. They can't see their friends. And when I was that age, my friends were everything. I mean, my parents were cool, but not that cool. They can't wait to vote. And then some of them are going to be like, wait a minute. A 15, 16-year-old that's very bright and very intuitive is going to say, well, I'm in this situation because of the coronavirus and this failed leadership, and I can't go to school, I can't see my friends, and I got to wear a mask everywhere I go. And my life has essentially been the social aspect of my teenage life. The best years of my life have been diminished because what? Because of Hillary Clinton's emails, because y'all didn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton. Can you imagine how that is forging and fired these young people's sentiment toward democracy? And they're also going to be very mad at us. They're going to be mad at us, this entire, cohort of Americans that were alive and were a voting age population in the year 2016, because whatever point America was trying to prove by getting someone who was anti-political, who was anti-Hillary Clinton, who was a lightning rod to the system, and you wanted a businessman, you wanted somebody who played a businessman on The Apprentice, you want to make that person president. That was a terrible mistake. And I won't expect anybody who voted for Donald Trump to admit that mistake, but we know you're sorry. But there's going to be an entirely new generation of people. And another thing that I don't talk about nearly as much as I should, because my perspective on it is just, I'm an old person, right? I look at the classic problems of America, and that's where I put my focus and attention. It's racism and, a poor education system. Whenever I have to hear somebody who was in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s or older, like, oh my God, I never learned that in school. That means the education system is as broken as the criminal justice system. Monique Liston had posted something on Facebook yesterday, day before, and she said I can't believe we never learned this in school crowd has to come to terms with the fact that they are now the ones teaching school. When we have our conversations about race and culture and how they intersect in this nation, and people say, Sherwin, oh my God, I never knew that. I'm just thinking about how many lives you've ruined at the age of 60 where you didn't know a basic understanding of the largest minority group in the country. Like, oh my God, I never knew that. I didn't know. I never thought about that. That's your whiteness talking. And let me not blame you for your whiteness. because America was founded on that principle where whiteness was just normal. You don't have to know certain things about other communities. You don't have to know things about how the cultures of other people that live on the other side of the track work, because it doesn't affect your life. You don't have to know anything about the history of the oppression of people in this nation if it doesn't directly impact you. If you're not one of those people, right? It's like it doesn't matter until it happens to us. Like, oh, cancer is terrible, says the person who's never had it, right? But we have this real opportunity for a paradigm shift in this nation. But the issue that I have never given as much attention to is climate. There's young people, and I say young people like under, what's young nowadays, guys? What's a young person? 30? When I turned 30, I didn't feel old at 30. I felt alive. Like 25, that's a young person, right? You're 25 and under, certainly a young person. Climate is their issue. It's an existential threat. Like they lose sleep over it. And over the years, I've been trying to absorb the anxiety that young people feel about climate. Because I grew up in a world where we didn't even recycle. And when we were told that we had to recycle, I grew up in Brown Deer, moved to Milwaukee after I graduated from college, been in Milwaukee ever since. So I've actually been a Milwaukee resident longer than growing up in Brown Deer. But when we got a recycle bin, it was a little bin, a little plastic bin. It's where you put paper and plastic and whatever. It was an annoyance. Like, why do we have to separate our garbage? But it also makes sense that the antiquated world of not recycling, or recycling was a novelty, kind of forged my understanding of taking care of the environment. And I'm not alone in this sentiment that everything that is here on Earth is just ours for the taking. You can just take stuff and not have to worry about the repercussions. You can just build cars and have them spit poison emissions into the air because it disappears into fairy dust. Well, actually, it doesn't. It gets trapped under the Earth's atmosphere. And the sun's rays, when they hit the Earth after 8 minutes of travel from the sun to the Earth, those rays heat the Earth. But a vast majority of the sun's rays are reflected off of the polar ice caps and they go back into space. But when you have this thick layer of carbon and carbon emissions thickening the Earth's atmosphere, those sun's rays that would be bouncing off of the white polar ice caps and ice and snow are trapped under the Earth's surface. Therefore, very gradually, most days, weeks, you won't even notice it. Most months, you won't even notice it. You only can notice it when you look at a span of time over years, because the sun's rays are trapped under all of the emissions from our cars, from our trucks, from our transportation, from our buses, from our factories. Fewer and fewer of the sun's rays are able to be reflected back into space, therefore melting the polar ice caps. When you have less white polar ice caps and snow, there is less ability to reflect the sun's rays back into outer space, and it heats up the Earth. I cannot get more elementary and more simple than that. And it probably took me 40 years to be able to articulate that to where I understand it. And there are some young people that will be dealing with our carelessness and our recklessness when it comes to emissions, and a carelessness and a recklessness of the environment. Their entire lives are going to have to be dedicated to fixing what we took for granted. And for that, I am sorry. But just think of how they're going to be even more motivated for policy changes. And I appreciate that. We're going to break the system. From BuzzFeed News, with just 20 days to go until Election Day, almost 12 million Americans have already voted, according to data compiled by the U.S. Elections Project as of Tuesday afternoon. The figure, which includes both ballots cast in person and absentee or mail-in ballots returned to local election offices, comes as more states open early voting locations and the window for registering to vote closes in others. In fact, I believe your last day to register to vote by mail in Wisconsin is today. While the total number of ballots cast across the country so far represents just 8.6% of the 2016 total turnout, the number of people who have voted in Vermont, as an example, 95,885, account for nearly 30% of the state's total turnout in the 2016 general election, according to the data from the University of Florida-run project. In Wisconsin, Virginia, and South Dakota, that figure is almost 25% of 2016 levels. In Georgia, where a record number of 128,590 ballots were cast on the very first day of early voting, more than 40% increase from 2016. The high turnout has led to long lines and hours-long waits for people to vote. 128,000 people in Georgia. And guess what, Donald Trump and Republicans? Those are mostly Democrats. This spells disaster. And also considering the fact that Joe Biden is polling above 50%, even if Donald Trump is at 48 and Joe Biden is at 51 or 52, these are all very, very good signs, but also keeping in mind the compound effect as more and more polling locations open. We haven't even started the real fun stuff in Milwaukee. Oh, Milwaukee is going to show out. We are now seeing people that are dealing with their anger and their anxiety of not going to work and losing their job and not getting their unemployment and not getting another stimulus check. They're taking that out on the ballot. Don't get mad at each other. Don't get mad at me. Get mad and vote. On Tuesday, Gwinnett County's website listed a wait time of 8 hours for the county's election office, one of 9 early voting centers. Joe Sorensen, a spokesperson for the county, told BuzzFeed News that was just an estimate and that the true wait peaked at 6 hours on Tuesday at the location, citing continued slowdowns with the state's voter registration and a relatively high number of people waiting in line before the office opened at 5, before the office opened that morning. They didn't say what time it opened. We got to break the system because they didn't have a lot of faith in us. They didn't think that the American people, for all the political commercials we see and all of the campaign activity, they didn't think that Americans would come out and vote. They didn't believe that. Oh, we're only going to print a certain amount of ballots. Oh, we don't need all this additional staff. People always say they're going to come out for the election, but they never do. Well, this time they are. Let me shift things back to the other looming issue that is causing not just panic and anxiety, but sickness and death, and that is coronavirus, which we know the cases are spiking in Wisconsin, which should be a grave cause for concern for all of us. And so there has been this jockeying back and forth, essentially with people's lives, but with Governor Tony Evers, who was elected, because Republicans always say that, you elected us to do this. You elected us to overturn Roe versus Wade. Well, you elected us to pick Amy Coney Barrett to the U.S. Supreme Court. They always say that. Okay, fair enough. We'll give you that. Some of you cheated. We know some Republicans do more voter fraud than Democrats. We know you gerrymandered the districts, but okay, we'll give you that because I assure you the pendulum will swing. The Democrats are going to gerrymander the districts too. We will, and that's why I understand the short-term pain of having these gerrymandered districts, and now, Democrats are in support of this nonpartisan, gerrymandering commission where you don't draw the lines for representation with partisan folk. You do it with nonpartisan people. I don't even know what a nonpartisan person is because everybody is partisan. But anyway, I think the Democrats should have waited. Because if they gerrymandered the districts and they have all of these electoral victories and they have all these legislative victories and they get to essentially do whatever they want when it comes to policy, don't Democrats need a turn at that? Why do we get the short end of the stick and then all of a sudden we're the ones to promote fairness? No, I think it's time for Democrats to be unfair. Stop being so weak. The Republicans have been kicking our asses and laughing at us and have essentially ruined the country. So by kicking their asses, we make the country better. See how that works? So the volleying, the back and forth between Democrats and Republicans has been Governor Tony Evers, who was elected just like them. And you can't gerrymander the state of Wisconsin. More people voted for Democrat Tony Evers over, he beat Scott Walker. I almost forgot his name. And Tony Evers has got executive authority, which the Republicans in the legislature quickly tried to pass a package of bills and expected Tony Evers to sign a package of bills to limit his own authority, which is just dumb. But again, that's Republicans showing out for their bitterly divided partisan citizens who are dying from coronavirus just like everybody else. And because Tony Evers is the executive, he did win the election. He has these executive powers to say, we have a health pandemic, we have a health crisis. And as the executive, I can implement these emergency orders for the health, safety, and well-being of the people in the state of Wisconsin. Not to be outdone, Republicans have challenged the governor's authority on the coronavirus. And I think if you get down to the bare essentials of it, when you interpret the Constitution, because when this stuff lands in court and they sue and it goes to court, and then it goes to a circuit court, then it goes to an appellate court, then it goes to a federal court, then it goes to whatever the federal district court is in Chicago, which has never been friendly to Wisconsin. Then it goes to the Supreme Court, where you know what happened to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, especially with Amy Coney Barrett, not Coney. I need you to think of what she is going to represent, because a lot of these things, where Republicans lose the policy argument and the public discourse argument, they go to the courts because they have packed them, because they know they're going to lose. They're so much better at that than the Democrats. They're so good at being evil. They perfected it. The Democrats, because there's a larger tent, we have to be nicer, because people in our tent want soft, gentle, caring policy. We need more bomb throwers. We got a couple. I wish James Carville was about 50 years younger, because he didn't play with Republicans. Amy Coney Barrett is the Grim Reaper. She's wearing the cloak. And what's that thing? The Grim Reaper has that he's got a thing. What's that called, you guys? That he's got got a hook on it. Somebody knows what it's called. Is it a sickle? What is the Grim Reaper? Anyway, that's her. What America is right now, what it's been for the last 4 years, is going to be crystallized in her appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court. She will keep the Trump era alive with decisions in which she could be the deciding vote. I hate to admit it, but I don't really think there's anything that we can do. We can't stop her confirmation. But the Republicans, even though they are going to go extinct for their support of a fascist, they're not going to let you forget them, and they're not going to let you forget this. And so by for even nominating her, they are sending a resounding message that we hate what America has become. And this is the Grim Reaper holding that thing. Let me check the comments, because I know some of y'all have already told me what it's called. A sickle is smaller and one-handed. Thanks, Justin. But you guys got to know what that thing is. The Republicans are going to be they're the Grim Reapers as well, because they're killing people. And I said years ago that the only thing left for Donald Trump to do was kill people. And there you go. You're going to remember us because we, as a cohesive unit of partisans, hate this country. We hate that it's becoming more diverse. We hate that it's becoming more inclusive. We think that white people are being discriminated against, which is amazing, because equality to the white racist feels like oppression, which is such a dynamic concept. When things become fair and everybody has to compete and everybody has the same opportunities and get the same education and make the same money, when you just level the playing field, for white people that have made their lives, their fortunes, their careers, and their inheritances off of marginalizing people and keeping people out and not hiring people and not helping people, and any program that's designed to help folks when they're down, you cut it out because you don't want any competition. When you start to remove all of those disgusting and illegal and unconstitutional barriers, what happens? They feel oppressed, and they would rather destroy the world than have to compete with someone that they deem as less than human. And they're going to make us remember that, and they're going to go down in history, because I'm going to write part of that history. That's exactly what I'm going to say. Oh, Justin, I don't know how to pronounce that. A scythe? A scythe? The thing that the Grim Reaper holds is called a scythe. I don't know, all of a sudden I have a list, but thank you, Justin. It's oh, you didn't say sickle. You said skith. Scythe. Don't let me get off track. I get distracted very easily. Anyways, So Governor Evers put in an emergency order that expired September 25th. Then, because we couldn't get ourselves in check with the coronavirus, and he put in another emergency order that a conservative organization wanted to challenge. And then a court said the challenge is unconstitutional. So Tony Evers, October 8th, the new renewed emergency order could go into effect. Well, as of this morning, the Tony Evers October 8th emergency order, which says bars and restaurants and other public places have to go back down to 25% capacity. Now there's another challenge to the ability for the October 8th order to go forward. So now we're back to where we were after the September 25th order expired. It's nuts, I know. But here's the view at its most elemental and basic, because I know this stuff's got to drive you guys nuts. It drives me nuts. What do you want the Constitution to be? Do you want it to be, and I think this is a judicial philosophy that a lot of jurists have. Do you want it to be the authentic document that was written by white land-owning males that used like 52 pronouns for men and he and him, and the document didn't reference women, Native Americans weren't human, African slaves were 3/5 of a human being? Do you want the document to still be alive in the actual quoted words of the framer? Do you want the US Constitution in the year 2020, almost the year 2021, during a global pandemic, to be authentic to what white guys wrote between 1789 and 1791? Or do you want the US Constitution to be interpreted for this America, for a diverse and inclusive America, where women are people, where Black people are people, where Native Americans are starting to get a shred of their rights? What do you want it to be? There is the conservative set that says, no, it's exactly how the racist landowning slaveholders wanted it. There are some that say the Constitution is a living, breathing document. That's why we've amended it 27 times. It needs to be much more inclusive and reflective of what America has become. And I would say the latter is true, because they would not have had an amendment process. It's very tough to get a constitutional amendment. It's hard. It's really super hard. Calling a constitutional convention, which Republicans have tried to do on a number of occasions. In fact, our former governor, Scott Walker, wanted to call a constitutional convention, I think, to add like a balanced budget amendment. Was the stupidest thing ever. But that was just a litmus test to see what Republicans had to do, including what kind of campaigns, how much money they'd have to raise and spend to actually change the US Constitution. Because once they smell blood in the water, once they figure out how to get a constitutional convention and get a 28th Amendment added to the Constitution, then they can begin to retract and subtract the amendments that have gotten America closer to its ideal self. Now, it didn't work, because a constitutional convention, getting an amendment added is just almost a political impossibility. It just takes a lot. It takes a lot. I mean, you've got a full 10%. I don't know why I said third. 10% of the constitutional amendments are dedicated to Black people being human beings. That's how bad they didn't want us to be considered people, that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments relate to Black people's inclusion into America, even though we became the economic floor and the basis for what America is. But do you want the US Constitution to be exactly as written? Or do you want it to be a document that has a level of flexibility inside the structure of the amendments to be more fair, honest, and inclusive? And there's evidence of both. But that old antiquated judicial philosophy, and Amy Barrett, whatever. The Republican Party that has cloaked itself in an antiquated America still wants to live on. But at the end of the day, that is what the Constitution was originally created to be. From the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, a Sawyer County judge has for now blocked Governor Tony Evers' latest order to curb the spread of coronavirus by limiting public gatherings and the number of customers bars and restaurants may serve at one time. The order from Judge John Yackel knocks down the order at a time of record hospitalizations, new cases, and deaths, and after bars and restaurants have lost a massive amount of revenue as customers stay away while the pandemic rages on in the state. And so what I would say is this, the simple analysis is, look, I got friends in the restaurant industry. One of my biggest sponsors since I've ever been on talk radio is in fact a bar / restaurant / supper club on Milwaukee's South Side. I talk to Chris all the time. Business is horrible, but he gets it. He wasn't in a rush to open up when bars and restaurants were opening up way too early. He said, I'm not going to do that. His customers and his staff were calling for him to open up early. He said, I'm not going to do that. We're going to pause. We're going to take our time. We're going to get this damn thing right. And we're going to open up when it's time. He also, went to extraordinary lengths to put together a 40+ page document of different safety protocols, including hiring people to just clean stuff, to just wipe down surfaces. Just a person up at their full-time job is that, Sherwin touched the windows. Somebody touched the door handle. It's expensive to try and implement these new protocols. That's why people don't like regulation, because regulation make you have to hire people to do regulatory stuff. While I understand that bars and restaurants and other businesses have lost money, you understand if we don't get the coronavirus under control, you're going to lose your customers, literally. Like, they'll never be able to spend money with you again because they're dead. How does that make sense? It's like, get all the money you can before they die from the coronavirus. Because there is a vision of America, and it's usually the very conservative people that want to open everything up. Freedom, I can do whatever I want. I don't have to wear a mask, because they believe that America is dying because it's becoming blacker and browner. They think the country is dying, so why do we have to close anything down? Because the longer we wait and the more we go into the future, the more inclusive this country is going to be. And some of them, I'm not kidding you guys, they would rather be dead than see an inclusive America. You know what I say to them? Go ahead and die. We're not going to miss you. Hope you got a life insurance policy. And if I'm sounding cold when I say that, look at how they are treating this country. If you don't want to be here, what do they say? You can go back to Africa. We all can go back to Ireland, except the goddamn Irish wouldn't take you because you're from America. It's very simple. You're not going to have any customers if they're all dead. And so here we go again. And again, it comes back to the Constitution, and judges are going to be deciding over coronavirus stuff. Like, there's going to be precedent that's going to be set in the courts because of this real dubious period of time in America, where we're going to be, this precedent was set in 2020 because of the coronavirus. It's going to go on for the next 40 years probably. We're just in a real low point, the dark ages of American history, all because Hillary Clinton's emails. Do you want your freedom to do whatever you want, to supersede the health and safety of your fellow Americans? And that's a yes or a no. There's no middle. Don't explain it to me. Don't litigate it. Do you want your freedom to go in public, to open a bar, to open a restaurant, to not wear a mask, to just do whatever you want all the time? Because America and freedom and the Constitution grants a lot of rights to individual freedom. The Constitution is more of a document about your individual freedom and property rights than damn near anything else. Do you want it to just say, you know what, I can do whatever I want. The government can't tell me what to do. Freedom of speech actually fits neatly into that paradigm, because you can say whatever you want, and unless you say you're going to kill a bunch of people. But even then, you probably can modify it to where you still can say you're going to kill a bunch of people and still consider it free speech. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater when there's no fire. But you can yell, I smell smoke. The government cannot interfere with personal rights, freedoms, and liberties unless there are legislative actions that give legitimate reasons backed up by the public that votes. It gets complicated. We don't need to make it that complicated. Do you want this to be about, I can do whatever I want, the government can't tell me to stop and close my business and to wear a mask? Or do you give the government a level of latitude and authority to protect public health, even if it means temporarily curtailing some of your freedom? Yes or no? Is it about you, the individual, and your selfishness and your greed and your ability and the possibility to make money and make profit? Or is it about having a future that exists because you, for a moment in time, reduce your desires for greed so you can have customers in the future. T. Bender says, hey, good morning, Sherwin. How will this affect us? The Supreme Court ruling on census count being cut short. Thank you, Mr. Bender. Or Miss Bender. I think you're a Mr. Bender. I really got to talk about that, but I've got a whole bunch of other stuff that I also want to talk about that I hadn't considered that. So you know how we were telling everybody to fill out your census, and there were signs. You guys see they look like political yard signs. I live in the St. Joseph's neighborhood because of St. Joseph's Hospital. I like living in a neighborhood really, really close to a hospital because if old Sherwin has a stroke, which some days I get very upset, and you might see me just stroke out, and that's not funny because strokes run in my family. I live so close to the hospital that I have a better chance of mitigating some of the damage from my stroke. Just as an example, let me knock on wood for I stroke out this morning. But living in the neighborhood where there's a hospital means I can get there quicker. I don't have to go across town. Right? So I stroke out, you guys call 911. Oh my God, Sherwin just stroked out. And then the people come and they break in my house. My alarm would probably go off, but that's cool. But I could get to the hospital very quickly because I live in the neighborhood where there's a hospital. Hospital funding, some of it is federal, some of it is through private pay insurance, and they make and get money through other means. When we are not filling out the census, or when Donald Trump orders a stop of the US census count arbitrarily, then people who rely on, just as an example, it could be public funding for infrastructure because our roads and bridges are messed up. Our potholes can't get filled because we don't have the money. The federal government can say, oh, okay, you've got a certain amount of population. That means you have a certain number of people driving, a certain amount of cars. We're going to kick you off a little bit more of this dough, which is your money, by the way. We're going to give you a little bit more of your dough because your population has grown and you have more wear and tear on your roads. Here's some money for infrastructure, right? Oh, your population has grown and you have increased healthcare needs. Oh, okay, here's a little more dough so you can keep St. Joseph's Hospital and St. Luke's and St. Mary's Hospital open. When you are not counting all of the people, you're not getting a true representation of the demand for those very, very important and crucial services. And we have been lagging behind as an African-American community. And I hate having to blame Black people for things because the Blacks didn't vote in 2016 caused this problem. Before we get off into that tangent, because I know if I stopped right there, people are real comfortable blaming Black people not voting in 2016 for Trump, but will say nothing about the white people, including some of the white people they're married to, they live with, they share meals with, and they work with, that all voted for Trump. It's us, right? And whatever the 23,000 number is that didn't vote, that you blame all of that on us. You understand that is just as racist as the Proud Boys when you say that? Don't say that. Don't say that. Because a lot of white folks say racist things and they don't know it. I'm here to tell you, don't say that. Now, if you go and say it and you get canceled because of a Black person who wants to cancel you, I told you, replay this broadcast. It is just, where has this country even gone? I was talking to a friend the other day. We don't even recognize where we live. The African American sentiment in this country is one of lack of trust. And so when African Americans are not filling out the census or not voting in a number that white progressive Democrats need us to vote in, because they can't do it by themselves. There's not enough white Democrats to elect Democratic candidates in Congress and the Senate. In some places there are. And as America becomes much more diverse, then white Democrats are going to be heavily reliant on African Americans. And at the end of the day, how has life dramatically improved in the last 50 years for African Americans? And I would just give an example. It's like, yes, there have been some marginal improvements. And yes, of course, you have rich Black people, but no, everybody can't be Oprah. The improvements have been small. But if you look at just one example of how African Americans have been negatively impacted, real wages in the last 50 years have either stayed flat or they have fallen. And there are a lot of Black wage earners in this country, meaning that our earning potential with the same level of education has actually gone down. That's been Democratic presidents, that's been Republican presidents, that's been with strong unions, that's been with weak unions. Healthcare, the cost of healthcare has gone up. If real wages have gone down, and remember, this affects African Americans much more severely than everybody else because we were kept out of the ability to own property because of housing covenants. We didn't have equity. My generation didn't come into a generation of my parents and grandparents owning a house, paying off the house, and giving me the paid for house where I never have to make a mortgage payment and never have to pay interest. Do you know that that simple fact can explain like 40% of poverty? Just being able to buy a house. And they say, we're not going to let Black and brown people own property because one day the equity they get from these homes is going to help them become competitive financially, educationally, and even the criminal justice system because they'll be able to hire lawyers. So we're going to prevent them from having equity. And we're going to domino the entire system from that simple fact. And so when African Americans don't participate like you want us to, it's because you just recently got off the couch and started saying Black Lives Matter, but you've danced to our music, you've laughed at our comedians, you've enjoyed your friendships with Black people, but at the end of the day, you still hate them when they don't do what you need them to do for your political agenda. And to that, we say, cool. We have always taken care of you. The Black breast has fed white America, literally and figuratively. And if we lose faith in the system and we're not voting in these incredibly high numbers, really through a political party system that was created around Black people, almost like, well, what do we do with the Blacks? Do you want them? Do we want them? Well, what if we make them people? What if they become voters? Well, if they become people and voters, then what are we going to do with them? Are we going to have to give them fairness and equality and rights? I don't know. Let's change the Constitution. Damn, there's more and more and more of them because they're having babies and they're starting to become productive and we need them to be a part of the labor force. Damn, well, let's give them another constitutional amendment. What about property rights? Can they own guns? What about the Second Amendment? Are they going to come and they're going to kill us? Let's give them another constitutional amendment. You have created a political party system around Black people. So if Black people decide on their own accord that they don't want to vote, there is historical precedent and pedigree as to why not. Now, we've changed a little bit. We know that you need us to take care of this nation. We know that Black women are the backbone of everything. When they get lifted, they lift everybody else up. They have the strongest backs on planet Earth, and it's entirely not fair. And so what do? We just call them strong. Like that's their reward for fostering a nurturing sense for humanity. We just call them strong Black women. Just like we call our essential workers, the people that work at the grocery stores, we call them heroes. If they're heroes, pay them more than $7.25 an hour. If Black women are the caretakers of America and what a positive future can be for this country, then give them a fair shake maybe, or is that too much? That all goes back to the census. And we were telling people, and I had interviewed County Executive David Crowley and Milwaukee Common Council President Cavalier Johnson, and some of the first things they said is, please everybody fill out the census. Why? Because when we fill out the census, resources that are desperately needed in neighborhoods and communities where resources were systematically taken out, those resources can come back because you don't argue with a census count because there's protocols. If your population is just so, you get X amount of dollars per person, $1,000. I think they've adjusted the figure, but it's $1,000 or $3,000 per person of population. And when you don't get an accurate census count, if it's low, which it is, and we're going to lose money, then you're not going to have the services that you need for life during a pandemic. And then what happens? You know what happens? They got to raise your taxes. And then we hate the elected officials that raise the taxes. But if you didn't fill out the census, and Donald Trump stops the census count, which is our federal money coming back for things which we will not have to raise taxes to implement and to repair and to fix and to invest in, then you get mad at the people for raising your taxes because we need the money. There's potholes that are so deep. This is just one example. If I drove on a certain pockmarked pothole street in Milwaukee, I would fall through the earth. You would never see me again. Well, actually, no, if I still had my cell phone in the middle of the earth because I fell through a pothole, I would just do my broadcast through my phone. Hey, everybody, I fell through a pothole because you didn't fill out the census. Don't make me have to do a broadcast from a pothole. Denise Jones, Sherwin, it is getting real. Black Lives Matter. I mean, we know. But do Black Lives Matter only when you see George Floyd murdered? Because y'all know that that could be any of us. I mean, you've seen enough Black people killed, choked, when the chokehold is illegal. You've seen it. You know their names because you made people make the signs with the names on them. Is it only real then? Or when there is poverty in Black communities because we're just essentially in our first generation of being able to own a home? And that simple fact has led to generations and generation after generation of poverty. Like, did Black Lives Matter then? When you didn't want Black people moving in your neighborhoods because somebody told you that we would decrease your property values, did Black Lives Matter then? And I'm not trying to rehash the past because as we move forward, we know more. And when you know better, you do better. And I'm glad that people are coming to the realization, but if America has ever mattered, ever, and maybe to you, it's always mattered. You love the flag and you're one of those people that when it's the 4th of July, you know, the people that have many, I don't even know where they get all those little flags. They have so many little flags. They put them in their yard. America, or Memorial Day where we honor our dead. If America has ever mattered to you, then Black life has had to have mattered to you too. Because there wouldn't be in America. And we don't want to say I told you so, but when African Americans don't vote and don't participate in the levels that you want us to, because we're still essentially like public property, right? We're like, our agenda has to be agreed on by everybody. And that's why for so long, and I've taken a lot of, criticism for it and worse, they've tried to tarnish my reputation because I help African American elected officials become policymakers so they can have a political agenda that is reflective of the sentiments of Black people in segregated communities. Because a lot of white people that live elsewhere, they just don't know because they don't have policy discussions with African Americans. And now it's even harder because of how partisan things are. And they always say, why do you make everything about race? And when somebody says that, talking to their Black friend about whatever, and we bring up race because everything is about race. That's why we bring it up, because this is how the country was founded. It really comes back to the physical attributes of a human being having their life diminished. And whenever someone says, why do you make it about race? They know that it's about race and they don't want to talk about it because the last thing you don't want to embarrass somebody or make them feel like they're ill-equipped for an intellectual argument, because that is where I know that the temperature of an argument begins to rise when you live in a space that is the blind spot of white America, right? And we as Black people, we live in a place, like our society, our culture, how we get by from day to day, how we deal with the systemic issues is a place that white people don't see, mostly because they created it so they didn't have to see it. They left it for us to deal with. And when we bring up the space in which we live and have to breathe and the conversations that parents have to have with their Black children, well, if you see a cop, 5-year-old Black child, here's what you need to do for the rest of your life. And you wonder why Black people don't want to be police officers? We have been told that they can help you, but if they decide to, they also can kill you. So it's like a crapshoot. They may help. They also might murder you. Depends, on how their day is going. And so when we bring up how we interface with this country, and here's the crazy thing. Want to hear something crazy? We love this country. Right? Looks like we don't, sounds like we don't. Defund the police. It's all a bunch of stuff we say. Call everybody and everything racist because it kind of is. We still love this country. We don't want to go anywhere else. First of all, we don't want to start over. I mean, some Black people, I guess, are willing to start over, but we have so much invested. And if you've ever watched an investment grow, or even it's like a savings account. We put up with it. We deal with it. We go through hard times. We go through, longer periods of unemployment. Even Black people with college degrees, and we endure so much. And we get these covert, like microaggressive racial comments. And we've got to shuck and jive because if you upset the white people or if they raise an eyebrow at you, they'll fire you and make sure you never work again. A whole bunch of stuff. And we deal with it every day. But then every day there's something happens. Somebody gets elected. You hear about a guy named Barack Obama. You hear about a landmark judicial decision. An officer gets brought to justice. More Black people going to college and graduating and becoming entrepreneurs and buying things and selling things. And you see all of this over the span of your lifetime. As an example, my grandmother, who passed in 2012, who was born in Attala County, Mississippi in 1916. Other than slavery, Attala County, Mississippi would have been the absolute worst place on planet Earth for Black people. And that's the world she was born into. 1916, women couldn't even vote. White women couldn't even vote. Jim Crow would exist for 50 more years of her life. And before she died, she was able to vote for Barack Obama in 2008, and she almost made it to when she could have voted for Barack Obama twice. The investment we make in this country better start bearing fruit. And I believe that it will. And we believe that it will. And that's the only reason why we really haven't torn it up. Because the destruction that you saw just this summer with the George Floyd protest, that was a taste. Because you know how white Democrats want Black people to be voters and to be politically active, to help them with their agenda? Because I do believe that there are white folks who are true Democrats that want to see a much more fair, just, and equal world where there's equal pay and equal opportunity and the fair application of justice. I believe that. And so we join forces with them. But also, in the disgusting perversion that America is, there's white folks that will join us in destroying it. You see how that works? And so some of the stuff that you saw burn, some of those cop cars that were getting overturned and the police building you saw burned in North Minneapolis, that was white folks doing that. They're like, wow, we finally get it. Like, you Black people are really mad because George Floyd. We're really mad because we're drowning in debt and the climate crisis and the coronavirus. You know what? No, Jerome. I'll get this one. I'll burn down this cop car. Don't worry. Don't get your hands dirty because I'm mad like you. That was just a taste of what America can become if we don't realize what it's actually supposed to be, what it's meant to be. But we have no interest in doing that because really, any day of the week, Black people can just like, I don't think we need that Walgreens anymore. And we could just destroy it, but we don't, because we want to see the investment that we have made in this nation pay off. And very slowly but surely it is. Speaking of which, and there's a whole nother thing I wanted to bring up, but somebody said something about the census, and then you know how I can get. I noticed something. It's usually what Donald Trump doesn't say. Some people pay attention to what he does say, like, oh my God, he's so outrageous. I listen to what he doesn't say. And he really came to political prominence because of the whole birther thing. Like, he got his start by questioning the integrity of Barack Obama, which you can get away with in America because if you're Black and reasonably successful, they always question who you are. Is he really a citizen? Boy, this affirmative action needs to be overturned because it's working too well. So it's very easy to question the sincerity and also the accomplishments of Black people, because the way we are looked at by some people and not all people is just so irrelevant that it's impossible for us to be successful because we're lazy and we're thugs and we all go to jail, whatever. And so Donald Trump took advantage of that for his own self-endorsement. He's like, I'm going to question Barack Obama because it's a really easy and just lazy thing to do, to question the accomplishments of any African American, right? But I've noticed something. If Donald Trump is the racist that I know he is, which he is, and if he got his political prominence and got political attention because he was railing against Barack Obama, and then Barack Obama took the bait. Remember when Barack Obama pulled out the birth certificate? Because Trump said, just show us your birth certificate. Obama should have ignored him. But when Obama took time out of one of his press conferences to actually pull out his birth certificate, Donald Trump, the politician and the president, was born. Had Barack, and I'm not blaming Barack because he's probably getting urged by his white staff. That's another conversation. They're like, Mr. President, just show the damn thing, and then Donald Trump goes away. I'd imagine if they had that to do all over again, they would have told the president to not show the birth certificate to give Donald Trump a shred of political credibility, because he had no business credibility because American banks weren't even lending to Trump anymore. But now he had this new area in which he could gain credibility because he had burned every other bridge of credibility before. He was going to get political credibility, and Barack Obama's like, here's the birth certificate. And at that moment, how ironic is this? With Barack Obama's birth certificate, political president Donald Trump was born. Had Barack Obama not shown the birth certificate, his birth certificate, Donald Trump's political credibility and his presidency would have been aborted. From thehill.com, former President Barack Obama will hit the campaign trail for Democratic nominee Joe Biden, his former vice president, in battleground states in the final stretch of the presidential campaign, ABC News reported. Have you noticed that for a man who received his political credibility from bashing Barack Obama, Trump doesn't bring Barack Obama up as often as you think that he would. Donald Trump, being the racist that he is and having the Proud Boys and other neo-Nazis and white nationalist groups following him and supporting him and essentially committing acts of domestic terror on his request, why wouldn't he say, Joe Biden was the vice president for Barack Obama, to try and galvanize that racism that Donald Trump has used so very, very well? But he's not doing that, right? If you don't want Joe Biden, you can say he was picked by the black guy to be vice president. Why would you want Joe Biden, who passed the muster with a black guy, to be your president? But he's not doing that. Have you also wondered why Barack Obama is not out front and center, and he has not been out front and center every single day of the Trump presidency? Every now and again, Barack Obama will peek his head up and he'll tweet, then he'll go away. He's been very inconsistent, and now with the last less than 3 weeks, 20 days from today, the presidential election, Obama is now going to start hitting the campaign trail. Isn't that peculiar? Because Barack Obama still remains incredibly popular with Democrats. Why has he been so silent? And this is what I would say. Why is a diamond so expensive? Is it because it's beautiful? I mean, you can cut colored glass and it can be as beautiful as a diamond. Why are they so expensive? Because they're rare. And if we saw Barack Obama every single day tweeting and in front of TV cameras and railing against Donald Trump every single day, he would become commonplace and he wouldn't be as rare, and therefore he wouldn't be as valuable. Well, thanks guys for listening to me ramble about many things. Appreciate you. Wear a mask, vote, and be careful. Whatever. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me. It's always my pleasure.